Alright, this is an instructional video. I'm going to show you how to take your kit and basically turn it into one of these fully working headphone amplifiers. And your amplifier, as you can see, fits in a mint tin. There is a headphone jack, an input jack, and then a volume knob with a built-in power switch. So your kit is going to come looking like this. You're going to have all your parts you need in this kit, with the exception of there's a classroom set for the actual op-amp chip and the TLE2426 rail splitter chip. And those will just be separate because they need static dissipative bags to ship them. So you'll have to get one of those from your teacher. Inside each kit you'll have the following components. First I'll have a bag of resistors, and you can see that I've actually even got them labeled for most of them. So you can see that it actually says 1K on there, and then you can also see there's 100K there, and then here's a 20 ohm. The remaining resistors are going to be the 10 kilo ohm resistors, so those are going to be the 10K ohm, and that makes it quick and easy for you to pick them out and use them. If you get them mixed up or lost, you can look up a standard resistor color code chart, or you can actually get a multimeter and read off the value with the multimeter. Aside from the resistors, each kit is going to include one circuit board. It's going to include a molded battery connector wire. It will include a machined volume knob, an electrolytic capacitor, which is a 220 microfarad, I believe. Yeah, 220 microfarad electrolytic capacitor. An Alps potentiometer volume knob and on-off switch. 2 signal capacitors for the audio signal, and you can see they're film capacitors, so they don't have polarity like this one does where it has the minus sign. An op-amp socket, and this is so if you want to change out which type of op-amp you're using, you can. Also, you don't have to solder the op-amp directly. An input and output jack, which are the same jack, so you just get 2 of the same. You can see they each have 3 pins for stereo, so one pin's left, one pin's right, and the other one's ground. And then a low power LED to let you know if it's on or off. Additionally, your kit will also come with a pre-punched tin. All the kits are going to be Altoids red, so they'll look exactly like this, only they will have the holes pre-punched in them so that you can just slide your board right in there and stick it down with double stick tape. Alright, so the first step we're going to do is going to be put all the resistors in the board. So in order to do this step, we're going to need all the resistors. We are going to need your circuit board, and then for tools, I like to use some needle nose pliers. Maybe you can get some like this. Or you can get this nice set from Crescent at Home Depot that comes with a pair of needle nose pliers and then also a pair of diagonal cutters, which we'll use to cut the excess wire off the backside once we solder them. First things first, the resistor holes are all going to be, if you notice, it's kind of hard to tell in this. Let me see if I zoom in some. They're all going to be fairly side by side. So if you look at R1 and R2 are both 1K resistors. And so that's what we're going to solder in first. Let me get that back in focus here. And to do that, first we're going to have to bend these. And I like to get them a little closer on my patterns than a lot of people do. So I'll show you how I bend them so that they're going to fit nice. First step is going to be tearing off the paper, obviously. It's good to be careful not to mix up your resistors. It's also probably a good idea to just double check them anyway before you put them in, because if you put the wrong resistors in the wrong place, your amplifier will not work. So the first thing I'm going to do is just rip off those paper ends. And then what I like to do is you want to be very careful when you're bending them close to the resistor body that you're not grabbing the actual resistor and damaging it. So what I like to do is I like to kind of slide my pliers down to the edge, but I'm not really putting any force yet. Just lightly grip it and then give it a little bit of a twist, so I'm not bending it very much. And then I'll take my finger and kind of roll it so that it's about 90 degrees. And I'll do the same thing to the other side. So here I'm going to slide it, give it a slight bend, and then kind of roll it on my thumb. And you can get that kind of close to 90 degrees. And you can see now that that is a nice bend that's pretty close to the resistor body. So now we'll double check, see if it'll fit in. And be careful when you push these down, because if they are too wide, they'll bind and then they'll bend over, and sometimes it's hard to get them afterwards. So that's how I do that. Now a trick, a lot of people have problems getting them that close. So I'll show you a trick to getting them in there if you accidentally bend them too wide. So I'll bend one too wide real quick. Alright, so this one I bent much further away from the body of the resistor. You can see there's kind of some straight sections of lead there. So when I put this into R2, it's only going to go down so far before it's going to want to kind of bind on me. So you want to push it slowly until you hit that point, because if you keep forcing it, you can see right, let me focus this a little better. You see right here, it's hitting that section and binding, and we don't want that, because if I keep pushing down, it'll actually bend over to the other side. So what I like to do is I'll take my pliers and I'll kind of come in from the side here, and I'll just give it a little light squeeze, and then I'll push it a little further, and I'll give it a little light squeeze, and that'll actually kind of bend it so it's pretty close to the shape I want. Now I'm going to give it just a little bit more of a light squeeze, and it just needs a little bit more. And if it's really tricky, you can actually pull it from the back side. So you can see now that's in there, but it's certainly easier to just bend them closer the first time around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get my soldering iron, and I'm going to solder these two pins. And I could just put all the resistors in and do them all together, but that's a little trickier because you have a lot of leads in the way, and sometimes you're more likely, I think, to miss some leads, and then your amplifier won't work. Alright, so you can see we've had a little bit of a change of scenery. We're now at the soldering bench. I'm going to solder these first sets. I flip these over. You can see the kind of nice thing about having them so tight in there is I can actually shake it upside down and they don't slide out. And that's part of the reason I keep them so close together, which does make them harder to bend, but it does make it easier when you solder them. So for soldering tips, you can really use, it's not too picky on what you're using here. You can use your regular cone tips. I wouldn't maybe use anything this small, but you can use, that would work. I'm going to use this kind of a horsehoof shaped iron tip. I really like them because that flat edge they have makes it much easier to, I think, apply heat. But you know, your standard cone type is also fine. And for this I usually use, let's see what size solder I typically use. It's 1 millimeter diameter. It seems to work pretty well. For this whole project I pretty much use that except for the TLE 2426 rail splitter chip. So I'm going to real quickly solder these. Forgive me, this is kind of an awkward position to solder from. The camera's kind of where I would normally be sitting. Okay. And you can see all those are soldered. Usually before I clip the leads, I like to double check that they're still flat on the other side. They look good. So now I'm going to come in with my diagonal cutters and just cut those excess leads. And so those first two are in there. And now the ones I like to do next are, I like to solder the 10K resistors. There's 3 of those, and it's R3, R4, and R10. So I'm going to just bend those the same way I did the others. And I'm going to do that off camera because it's kind of difficult to do that right in front of the camera. Alright, so I've got all 3 of these bent. I'm going to do 3. Put in R3 there. Get it snug down. 4. And 10. And I bent 4. I must have been a little closer there. It's a little bit loose, so sometimes what I like to do is on the back side I'll flare them out a little bit. And that prevents them from sliding back down, which makes things easier. So now I'm just going to solder those just like I did the other 2. And then the next step is, of course, again, clipping the leads. And it's always important to wear eye protection when you solder for 2 reasons. One, these leads sometimes go flying when you clip them. That wasn't a good example, but sometimes they do. Which is a good idea to maybe put a finger over the end of it when you clip it. Also, you can poke yourself with a soldering iron and potentially lose eyesight, so you don't want to do that. So you want to always wear protective glasses when you solder. Okay, now the next resistors I usually do are the 100K, which you can see in the kit I've got marked. They say 100K. Bend them the exact same way, and they're going to be R7 and R8. And I'm going to flare those out just like I did the last ones, just so that they don't fall. And then I'm going to solder those real quick. So now you can see I've got quite a few of the resistors soldered in. All that leaves is 5 and 6, which is going to be the 20 ohm resistor, and they're smaller, they're 1/8 watt. And so for them, you don't want to bend them right up next to the body because they're actually narrower. They're narrower this way. And so what you want to do on them is actually, and you kind of have to eyeball this, but it's nice because the wire's thinner, so it's a little easier to get them into shape. So I kind of will go and grip them about that far from the body, and then I'll just turn it. And I'm usually not dead on, but it's close enough that I can get it in there. So you can see I've done 2. I'll do the other 2 now. And then when you put them in, they're too narrow or too wide. You can kind of pull them from the back side with your needle nose pliers. That's actually pretty close. You can see that's pretty close, but if they're like, yeah, that one's not quite going in. See how it's going in on one side but not the other? Focus that a little better. See how that's going in on one side, not the other? What you can do is just grab it from the back side with your pliers and kind of lightly pull up. And these I like to really twist out once I get it in there because they're loose enough they'll fall out. And then do the same thing with the other one. And that one fit in pretty well. So I'm definitely going to twist the leads out. And then, well, see, it's a little loose. Let me pull it a little more. So now I'm going to solder those just like I did the others. And that will complete the resistors. And I generally, before I will cut the leads, I'll look on the other side and make sure that they're flush up to the thing, because if they're not, you can actually grab the lead, like you can see here. That one's, let me get that in focus a little better. You can see right here, and it's not going to cause any performance issues, but if you want to look a little neater, you can actually grab the lead with your pliers and kind of put some tension on it, and then heat up that joint again, and it'll slide back and look a little neater. And now I'm going to clip those leads like I've done all the rest, and then all of our resistors are soldered. And the order I do this project in is generally height based, so the resistors are kind of the shallowest, where they have the least height to them. And so I do them first, and then everything else, you know, you can let kind of sit on. You can let sit on, you know, just have it push itself into place. So the next thing I do is going to be this IC socket. That's always second.